All right, for more on this, we're joined by Jesse Weber, who is an attorney and host on the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, a lot of questions. One of the things that struck me in the Mueller report is detailing these numerous points of contact the campaign or campaign officials had with Russians, some, the report seems to say, unknowingly, and in other cases, knowingly. Should they have known they were talking to agents of the Russian government?
You would hope so. I mean, first of all, let's just start from the point that thank goodness Robert Mueller put an end to the collusion term. He said there's no such thing as collusion. What we're really talking about is conspiracy and the idea that you need some sort of agreement. What it seemed to suggest when you read the report is you have a lot of independent actors doing things that they thought was in their best interest, but they weren't coming together. It'd be strange that they were getting information from people that they didn't know, or even if they did know they were getting this information, it's important to note that they might be able to get certain information and disseminate it, but as long as they weren't part of the hacking scheme, there's not necessarily anything illegal about that. It's the same kind of discussion we have with like WikiLeaks. You know, the idea of publishing sensitive or confidential information, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's how did you obtain that information? And when you look at the Russian efforts to interfere in the election, reaching millions of people through these social media accounts and hacking the DNC through these spear phishing emails, it's so egregious that you're right. At one point, how do you not know who you're dealing with? It's an interesting question.
And on the other hand, you have times where people are actively trying to set up a meeting with the president of Russia and a candidate for the presidency of the United States, which is seemingly unusual.
It is. And I think there was a lot about this election that was unusual. And then the question is, how much is dirty politics enter into something that's criminal? And I think that's an important point. You don't want to chill something. You don't, obviously, everybody tries to get an upper hand against another candidate. And if you have other incriminating information against somebody, I can understand how you want to allow leeway with that. But the other time is you don't want to deal with a foreign actor. There are rules against that. And what we saw in the Mueller report was he looked at all different areas of law, campaign finance law. He looked at foreign agent law to try to see if you're getting something of value from another person, a foreign national, do you know what you're doing exactly? Do you know what you're doing is illegal? And is that line of conduct criminal? And we saw that with the Trump Tower meeting.
Yeah, and when I read through this, as a layman, there are certainly points where it sounds like the president tried to gain control of the special counsel investigation, at points instructing people to fire Mueller. They didn't do it, but it certainly reads like something that starts to sound a lot like obstruction of justice. Why isn't it?
That's a great point. And, you know, when I was waiting to get the report, when I read William Barr's letter, I thought there were going to be really difficult issues of law and fact, like he said. So each one of those 10 episodes, I was expecting to see, in the middle, I don't know which way to go. Some of them were that way. Some of them I saw, I could see why they didn't bring a charge against this. There were other episodes where it seems like a really strong case of obstruction of justice, so much so that if it was the target of this investigation was somebody else other than the president, I wouldn't be surprised if a prosecutor brought charges. I don't know if it would be a successful prosecution, but I would see it. Now, the interesting thing about this is I don't think anybody's still clear about why did Mueller punt this? And I think that's one of the reasons that we want to hear more from Mueller about it. And was Attorney General William Barr the person and the DOJ, the department, to resolve these questions? Because I still would love to know from him and Rod Rosenstein and the Office of Legal Counsel and the other department lawyers that they spoke to, what was their legal reasoning? If they have something that makes sense, I would love to hear it, because some of it I'm still scratching my head about.
So you're talking about the belief that Mueller was operating under, that he couldn't indict a sitting president, so therefore why pursue an obstruction of justice charge if you can't indict the president?
A lot of what this report was a reasoning for why he didn't move forward. You know, the idea that if you can't sit and indict, you can't indict a sitting president, then his hands were tied, because if you bring up charges, then it's really unfair to the president. He won't have a day in open court to fight these charges. The other idea is, when we heard from Barr, that Mueller wasn't restricted by the Office of Legal Counsel on that point. So again, what was it? Was it the idea that, you know what, the president has Article 2 powers? It gets kind of confusing. Well, no. He said even if the president has authority, Congress makes these laws that even a president can fall under obstruction of justice. Again, what was restricting him here? I'd love to know that.
And certainly members of Congress are already calling for Robert Mueller to testify in the House and the Senate. Are those the types of questions you expect them to go after?
Sure, but the other questions I would love to know is there any disagreement between Mueller and Attorney General Barr? What did he think of his summary? Also, like we said, did he expect Attorney General Barr to make the final decision, or did he find out about it and say, well, that's his decision? Because there were parts in the report where he mentions Congress's powers. I don't know if he was specifically authorizing them to take the next step or just saying, hey, they create the laws, this is what we have to follow, or are they supposed to take a proactive role?
Did you see new details in here that may factor into other investigations?
What I saw is, and I have to tell you, it was a very embarrassing series of events that we saw. What it showed was a lack of understanding sometimes by President Trump of how the government works in different roles, and just an effort to try to hide things, whether or not, whatever the underlying content he was trying to hide. That kind of behavior, I wonder how would it factor into other investigations in the Southern District. If he was trying to do similar kinds of actions, similar kind of behavior, would that factor in? Obviously, there are players that will overlap, Jared Kushner, Trump Jr., Michael Cohen. But that behavior, which I have to say, no matter what side of the aisle you lie on, is really kind of shocking to see. And what's interesting to note is William Barr didn't disagree with any of the facts, the factual findings, just the legal findings, which means if you're looking at that Mueller report, you have to treat everything in it as true. And that's the thing that I'd be looking out for.
And with that in mind, what do you see as possible next steps for Democrats on the Hill? You know, there's more than a half dozen investigations going at the moment.
I mean, they're going to use whatever they can to go after the president in the court of public opinion. During the election, they're going to be touting this, and you can imagine President Trump, and rightfully so, will say, look at that report. Have I been charged with anything? This was a 2.5-year investigation, and it came up with nothing. It's going to be a fight now that we take out of the courtroom. Obviously, we're still going to try to get more information, but it's going to be ammunition for them to go after him because they're going to say no matter what that report said, it still shows that he obstructed justice. That's what the Democrats will say.
And there's just so much in this report. We're not even talking about the Russian election meddling and the scope of that was laid out there. Jesse Weber, thank you so much.
Thank you.